Okay, good afternoon to everybody. This is the last hangout on air for our MOOC, CSP4HS. So thanks to you all for joining us and for participating. We still have some issues to work on. The Create PTs were originally due today, but we have extended the deadlines. So please check out Piazza and some of the extension discussions and how you can file for an extension. And, some of the Unit 4.2 through 4.4s are coming up, based upon some of the new information that we have from the College Board just last week. So please keep in touch with us on Piazza through that. So we're very delighted to have Irene and Maureen with us today from the Project Guts and the CS for All work and the great things they've been working over the past decade or so on looking at STEM and computer science and the integration mechanisms and activities that they've provided down from middle school all the way up to other grade levels. So I'm looking right now at my purple book for CS principles, and if you look at Learning Objectives 2.3.1 and 2.3.2, all the questions are about modeling and simulation. There's like, I don't know, probably looks like a dozen or so essential knowledge statements all about how modeling and simulation is an important part, particularly of the abstraction big idea in computer science and computer science principles. And I think that's a really hard topic for many of the CS principles teachers to address. So we really want to get the experts on this topic, so you have them here with us. So I'll pass it off to Irene and Maureen and let them talk about maybe some of the things they've done in the past with Guts, Project Guts, and CS for All, and just some general statements that they might want to make to everybody as like advice for teaching modeling and simulation and other related things. So can you all take off for us?
Sure, thank you, Jeff. And I guess I'll switch over to screen sharing. Let me get that going. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Super. Okay, well, let me start with introductions. My name's Irene Lee. I'm the director of the Learning Lab here at the Santa Fe Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And today I'm joined by Maureen Psaila-Dombrowski, and she is the program manager for our New Mexico Computer Science for All program. We've been involved with teaching computer science in the context of science using modeling and simulation for the past 15 years. And we're really pleased to have this opportunity to share with you. We'd like to thank Jeff and Deepa for inviting us to talk about computer modeling and simulation. And as you will see, modeling and simulation is especially well aligned to the big ideas of abstraction and also to data. We're currently in the process of developing a new MOOC, similar to the one you're now enrolled in, called CSP-AIMS, which stands for the Aligned Integration of Modeling and Simulation. We'd love to get a sense for your needs and how we can help make the modeling and simulation portion of your course engaging and successful. Okay, so let me give you an overview of our presentation. First, we'll give you some background on computational science and how it relates and how it relies on computational thinking. Then we're going to introduce two of our programs that have been really successful in engaging students in computational thinking at the middle school and high school levels. And finally, we'll discuss how modeling and simulation fit into the CSP and tell you what we can about our new MOOC. Okay, so the science in the 21st century deals with solving complex systems problems that face us. These are problems like climate change, loss of biodiversity, energy consumption, and virulent disease. And many of these big, gnarly, complex systems problems are studied using computer models and simulation. So you can think of computational science as the intersection of computer science, mathematics, and science. Some consider it a new field of science with many different sub-sciences like computational biology, computational physics, computational social science, and computational chemistry, just to give a few examples. With the increased computational power we have, we're able to design and conduct experiments of models of systems that in the real world are too big or too expensive or too dangerous to experiment with. And with the computational power we now have, we can run multiple what-if scenarios quickly and generate huge amounts of data on different potential outcomes. So I just mentioned these new computational fields. Many of these fields use the tool of computer modeling and simulation. And there are many different kinds of modeling and simulation, including agent-based modeling, stochastic modeling, Monte Carlo simulation, and systems dynamics. We're going to focus on agent-based modeling. I'll get into that a little later. And you can think of computational thinking as the human skill of using abstraction, automation, and analysis when doing modeling and simulation. In our approach, we use this diagram to talk about the computational science cycle, where you take a real-world problem and abstract it first into an idea for a model. And that's a big abstraction step, and it's the same abstraction that you use in computer science. Now, once you have an idea for a model, you translate that into computer code or a computer model made up of lines of code. Then you take that model and you have variables and you parameterize those variables to give them a range of values. And now you have a model that can be used as an experimental testbed to run what-if experiments. And when you're doing that, that's called simulation, and you're producing data, and lots of it. And through analysis of that data, you can come to some conclusions. And those conclusions are primarily about your model. You have to interpret those conclusions, or those data, sorry, to see if they align with any real-world system, or if your model perhaps is not valid and does not represent a real-world system. And this is an iterative loop, a cycle, wherein you refine a model to the point where it can be used to make predictions about the real world. And as you see, there are key points where abstraction comes into play and data. Next, we're going to tell you a little bit about two programs we've developed that engage students at the middle and high school level in project work using this computational science cycle. The first is called Project GUTS, and the next one is New Mexico Computer Science for All. I'll start by introducing Project GUTS. So Project GUTS is a middle school program that began as an after-school club for middle school students in New Mexico. We offer curricular modules to be implemented each for a semester, and they really focus on modeling local phenomena as complex systems using a tool called StarLogo-Nova. More recently, we developed an in-school curriculum for implementation within science classes during the regular school day, and we've been offering teacher professional development through code.org and the program called CS in Science. So Project GUTS melds computer science and science through modeling and simulation. Students learn basic CS concepts and constructs as they develop their own models. They also are studying scientific phenomena as complex systems, and some of the examples from Project GUTS are spread of disease, traffic patterns, pollution, ecosystems, emergency egress, and so on. And what's really important and exciting about Project GUTS is students play the role of creator and innovator. They aren't simply the end users of models and simulations. Rather, they're coming up with their own ideas, making models that can be used to test those ideas, and then hopefully producing a final project and a presentation that encapsulates their work. In Project GUTS, as I mentioned, we use StarLogo-Nova, and it's a block-based programming language. What's beautiful about StarLogo-Nova and other agent-based modeling tools is that students as young as 4th or 5th grade with very rudimentary mathematical skills can still produce these really quite sophisticated models of complex systems just by being able to describe the behavior of individuals in those worlds. Here's an example. This is students who are studying the spread of disease, and they started with a model, a base model of a simple contagion, to which they added modifications, like they added rooms, they added behaviors of their agents, and they were trying to figure out whether, given the parameters of a certain disease, whether if it started in one corner of the school, it could spread throughout the school. So this is the kind of project that students do in Project GUTS, and we think that this also serves as a nice create performance task, or something similar to this could be the basis. In GUTS, we use this progression called Use, Modify, Create, where one of the first lessons is on using and decoding an existing base model. So in this case, on the left under Use, it's a model where if an agent bumps into another agent and one of them is sick, there's a probability that the illness passes from one to another, and over time you can see the spread of the disease. Subsequently, the student may modify it to represent either a disease they care about or a setting they care about, or both. And over time, you see what was once someone else's gets modified and modified more and becomes the student's own version, and it becomes an artifact that shows what their interest is and how they use computation. Students have agency, as I mentioned before. They are creators, they are innovators. We like them to take ownership of their projects. They practice iterative refinement. And most importantly, they get to investigate and potentially solve community issues that they care about. For more information on Project GUTS, you can go to projectguts.org, or you can see our code.org course, which is available at code.org Curriculum Science. We also have a MOOC that we ran last year and will run again in the next several months, and that can be seen at guts-cs4hs-appspot.com. Okay, now I'm going to turn this over to Maureen, and she's going to tell you about New Mexico Computer Science for All.
Hi, everyone. New Mexico Computer Science for All is a year-long teacher professional development program in computer science, specifically designed for high school teachers. There are three major goals for the program. The major goal was to take high school STEM teachers and train them to be future computer science teachers. In the process, we also created pathways for implementation of computer science classes in New Mexico high schools. And we also wanted to increase the number and diversity of students taking computer science classes in New Mexico high schools. As I mentioned, this is a year-long professional development program. The first portion of the program was an online UNM computer science class offered to the teachers. It's a graduate level class, and it's a semester long. During that class, there were quarterly workshops where the teachers got to interact with faculty members and facilitators to have face-to-face time and work on specific issues they were having trouble with. There is a summer professional development, our boot camp, where teachers got to focus on pedagogy and advanced computer science concepts that they didn't learn during the semester-long class. And the last portion of the professional development program is a hybrid computer science class offered to high school students. It's the practicum, if you will, for the professional development program for the high school teachers. This class is a dual credit class, which is offered through UNM, and the lab portion of the class is taught in the local high schools all across the state. The curriculum is offered online to the students, so they have access to that from UNM, and the teachers act as lab assistants. The New Mexico Computer Science for All program features the big ideas from Computer Science Principle Framework. Our particular strengths are creativity, abstraction, data, algorithms, and programming. We use agent-based modeling. In this case, it's a program called NetLogo, which is a text-based language that's linked to a graphics package where the students can do their program, and then it's automatically displayed as you can see on the right, so the students have this interactive experience. Because we use agent-based modeling and the students do model issues of interest to them as epidemiology or ecosystems, this demonstrates the wide applicability of computer science. So why is New Mexico computer science important? Computer science is the foundation of today's innovation economy. It's important beyond the IT sector, as Irene mentioned, in biology, chemistry, and physics, in healthcare, retail, weather forecasting, all throughout our whole economy. It incorporates critical thinking and computational thinking, and not only that, it's a very employable skill. So our program has been extremely successful so far. We had 2 cohort years that we had funding for. During those 2 cohort years, we had about 34 teachers go through the program, and those 34 teachers interacted with about 600 students total. And our demographics are quite good. We had 75% underrepresented groups in STEM, 20% Native American, 19% Hispanic, Latino, 1% African American, and 21% in 2 or more underrepresented groups. Also, there were 36% females in the program. The next step for our New Mexico computer science program is CSP AIMS MOOC, which aligns the integration of modeling and simulation into the CSP framework. It's a 6-week MOOC, which introduces a module on modeling and simulation that can be integrated into the existing CSP course using the big ideas of abstraction and data. And you will learn how to integrate, create, and explore performance tasks.
Okay, so getting back to the question of how does modeling and simulation align with the essential knowledge statements in the CSP. 2.3, that segment is on models and simulation, and it says models and simulations use abstraction, which they do. All of the 2.3 segment fits within the abstraction big idea. So we use models and simulations to represent phenomena. Abstraction is key. It's foundational to modeling and simulation because the models themselves need to be the abstractions of real-world phenomena. They include simplified representations of objects and processes in the real world and omit unnecessary features. So these, what I'm listing off, are essential knowledge statements basically summarized from 2.3.1. We can use simulations to mimic real-world events and run experiments about what the impact of different variables might be on real-world phenomena. And some examples we might include are in epidemiology, or the spread of disease, or ecosystem dynamics, how ecosystems are balanced or unbalanced, and how populations change over time. Going further in 2.3, models and simulations also generate new understanding and knowledge. And so when you run models and simulations, you're able to run what are called parameter sweeps. So you might have 2 variables that you think are important, and they can span a range of values. And with computation and with NetLogo, you're able to run all the various combinations of each of those variable settings. And furthermore, you can run each trial, say 100 times if you like. Noting that these examples that we're modeling are complex systems phenomena, they involve a little bit of randomness. So what you're figuring out when you run a simulation of a complex system is the landscape of potential outcomes. You're not figuring out if you run it once if your population of fish die. You want to see over a course of different variable settings the likelihood that your population will survive, if that makes sense. So in that way, models and simulations are used to run very many simulations and produce a lot of data. And from that data, you can understand features of the real world. Okay, so to be more specific, 2.3.2, I believe, was to formulate, refine, and test hypotheses. You can use the variables to phrase a question. Say, if I have 13 initial ill people in a population of 1,000 and their mobility is such, will the disease spread throughout the population? That's an example of a question you could ask of a model. And you could have a hypothesis that 50% of the time it will spread through the population and 50% of the time it won't. And you can then go and test that using the model as your experimental test bed. And of course, you wouldn't want to do that in the real world. You'd get a lot of people sick. So simulations facilitate this extensive and rapid testing of your models. They can help you determine if what you think is true about the real world. For example, perhaps I think that 50% of the time I collide with a sick person or I meet with a sick person, I'll get the disease. And you can test that in the model and see if the behavior of the model matches a real-world data set. And if so, your hypotheses on how the disease spreads or its transmission rate may be correct.
So the CSP AIMS MOOC course will be a 6-week-long MOOC. The first week we'll talk about basic foundations, agent-based modeling, and introduce NetLogo. The second week we'll focus on creativity. We'll expand the knowledge of NetLogo, the teacher's experience. The third week we'll focus on abstraction, and you'll start modeling a real situation. I think the third week we have owl migration. The fourth week we'll talk about algorithms and introduce, I believe, epidemics will be in that week. The fifth week is data and information, and we'll be talking about ecosystems. And week 6 will be individual projects and performance tasks and multiple choice questions that you might see in the CSP.
Something else, I mentioned that computer modeling and simulation also aligns slightly with the data section of the CSP, Big Ideas. And 3.1 says people use computer programs to process information and gain insights. And I wanted to expand upon that and say not just process information, but produce digital information. When you run simulations, as I mentioned before, you generate a large amount of data from your multiple runs. And then comparing that data produced by the model to real-world data sets tells us if our models and assumptions and abstractions are valid or not. Also within the data section is collaborate when processing information to gain insight and knowledge. And my thinking about this is the model itself becomes an artifact with which you can come up with scientific argumentation about. Right? So if Maureen had a difference of opinion of how some certain phenomena worked, she might investigate the guts of my model and see what I've implemented and maybe try to tweak some things and say, no, I think it works this way. Right. And then she could run the model, generate data, and we could compare the outcomes and compare both against the real world to see which one was more correct. Another learning objective is to explain the insight and knowledge gained from digitally processed data using appropriate visualizations, notations, and precise language. As you'll see, if we get time to demo a model, NetLogo is very visual. The artifact is not only in the code, but can be run as a model and we see the visualization as a micro world. So that's how we believe modeling and simulation align with the big idea of data. Okay, in the latter part of our CSP Aims MOOC, we hope to provide some useful examples to teachers, some samples of various create and explore tasks. For example, for the create task, we could give an example with an epidemic model or an ecosystem model. And then for the explore task, we could do a sample write-up on how tracking and modeling epidemics is used to control the spread of disease, and how tracking and modeling of ecosystems are used to preserve endangered species. So that's what we have for you at this point. Jeff, how are we doing? Do we have time for a demo?
Yeah, I would love to see a demo personally. I think a lot of our viewers would too. So if you could do that through a live, like through your screencast, that would be great.
Okay, which one? Emo or Epi?
Let's start with Epi.
Is 5.1 going to work?
Yeah, that's our chosen from last week.
Okay.
So this is NetLogo, the NetLogo window. The code is actually a text-based language, as I said, and then it connects to this graphical interface. And in this model, this is an epidemic model. We have one sick agent, the red agent. We have a hospital where the agents go and become immune. And each green agent, once they turn red, has a certain probability of becoming immune after a period of time. So we'll run this model.
So when they recover, they become immune from getting further?
Yes,
okay.
They have a probability of being immune. I can move a little faster than that. Sorry.
What are the different colors?
Green is a healthy individual, red is a sick individual, and yellow, we have a couple yellow here, they are immune.
Can you describe the abstractions in this model?
Sure. Let me think now. The abstractions are when the sick people die, the sick agents die after a period, they have a probability of death. They have a maximum time they can be sick. So the abstractions are that there is a certain probability that when two agents meet, if one is healthy and one is sick, there's a certain probability that the disease would be transmitted. There's a certain probability of, well, there's also the way agents move around, that's an abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
There's a, you can look at the code, should we look at
yeah, sure.
Look at the code.
Mm-hmm. So they're agents, right? And they move around. That's a fundamental.
That's a fundamental abstraction.
Uh-huh.
There's the abstraction that with the probability of them becoming immune. There's no inoculation that they can take ahead of time to prevent being sick. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of abstractions related
and the hospital too, right?
The hospital's abstraction.
Uh-huh, an abstraction. Mm-hmm. What about algorithms? What would you say is an algorithm in this code? Kind of the walk?
The wiggle
right?
walk, yeah. Uh-huh. The probability of being ill.
Mm-hmm.
It's all algorithms.
Algorithms, okay. So, great.
Okay.
So I see a student could use this as a basis for a create task. They might customize it to be a disease that they have in their part of the world or in the part of the US. So in which case they could change the transmission rate based on whether it was a highly transmittable disease or not. Right. They can make the environment more like their school or their neighborhood or their city. I guess they could dictate that different agents are different kinds of people. They could be children and parents and teachers and doctors or whatnot. And they could ask a question of the model and generate data to tell them about how certain phenomena might play out in their own neighborhood. Does that make any sense? Jeff?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The question I had, are the examples that are within the curriculum, are there like already pre-made examples, and then is there a chance for students to move on to like examples that may be in their own community, or can the examples grow and kind of be tailored to each?
Yes, definitely. Yes to everything.
Yes.
Yes.
So we hope that students will take this as far as they can. Maureen, in the curriculum, do they write this model in pieces and build it from small pieces?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It's built progressively in the curriculum, so they get a chance to see how you can implement more components, more abstractions into the model. Also, I think I'd like to point out, is that okay, that there's a huge models library that comes with NetLogo. There's a lot of biology-related models that already exist and can be freely modified.
Right. All their code is included.
Yes.
And
all these models are included when you download NetLogo from Northwestern.
And that was my next question of where do you get the data for that, because you want the models to actually, you know, if you ask a question on the model to get the answer to the real system, you need to have the correct data. So that's great to see that one. So.
Right. It depends on what the disease is and what you can search and find online. That is one thing we'd like to help develop or find are more appropriate data sets that students could use. So pre-cleaned data sets from the real world.
I was wondering, like, if students did some kind of creation of models in their own school. Maybe they asked questions or did surveys and found things. Is it possible? How hard is it to create a new model and to bring that into the context of the?
It's really not that hard. Once the basic, if you will, vocabulary and syntax of this particular programming language are understood, then the concepts are the same throughout, from one computer language to another programming language. So it's really not hard. We've had students, because our class involves an individual project at the end, we've had students do, all different types of projects.
Yeah, rather than a straight epidemic, right. they say, okay, maybe I want to study how a new trend in music takes off across the school, or how does gossip spread? If there's a rumor, could there be real people who always repeat it and repeat it correctly, or are there others who are more hesitant to repeat it, and others still who repeat it incorrectly? Right. So students are really excited when they can modify model and customize it to reflect what they care about. So Maureen, what's this one?
This one is an ecosystem model. We have little red fish, little gray sharks, and green plankton. And the red fish eat the green plankton, and the sharks eat the fish. During the eating process, both of them will gain energy. And they have babies, and the population, the plankton regrows, so the ecosystem can be stable. Oh, sorry, I did that right. Can be stabilized, hopefully. So we'll see how that goes. So there's an initial sort of growth of plankton, and then we see that the fish and the sharks reproduce to consume that initial surge of plankton growth. And over a period of time, we can speed this up a little bit. We can see that that eventually we'll reach, hopefully, an equilibrium. So there are. There we go. And I don't know if you can notice, but the sharks actually grow in this model, from little sharks to big sharks. So
where have you seen students take this kind of model?
This model?
Or just what other kinds of ecosystems would they modify this into?
Sheep and dogs herding, or sheep and wolves, right?
Oh, there was one about a bark beetle infection years ago.
Years ago, there was bark beetle. Yeah. The epidemic model, a lot of them like to do zombies.
Zombies.
The epidemic model.
So you get to mix both the epidemics and the ecosystem.
Yeah, the ecosystem. So they mix them together.
So I guess at this point, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and see if there are any questions we can
questions over here.
Answer for you.
Okay, we have quite a lot of questions here.
Okay.
Exciting. So first, I must thank Amin Lalani for your enthusiasm, sir. We really appreciate it. You have a big fan out here in him. Now, if we are interested in agent-based modeling and simulation, what resource or resources should we be looking at or looking for?
Okay, so if you're interested in the Star Logo tool, that's developed out of MIT. And if you just go to slnova.org, you will see the tool there. It's web-based and totally free. Or you can do a search on Star Logo and find out more about the development group and their resources and guides for using that tool. Within the Project GUT site, you'll see more of the curriculum and more information about professional development options available.
And then for NetLogo, if you just do a search on NetLogo, you'll find it pops right up to the download page. You can it has a version for Windows and PC and Macs, and so you can just download it. It's free. And there are also a lot of other databases of existing programs that you can take a look at.
So people all over the world, from high school or even middle school through researchers, use NetLogo. And there are many places where their models are shared.
Cool. This just answered a couple of the questions that Nathaniel Norman had asked, if the Star Logo and the NetLogo products are free.
Yes.
Which, so they're not paid subscriptions.
No.
And Kathy Metallo was asking, which you kind of alluded to, but I think we would really appreciate you to go a little more detail into this, is is it only intended for high school students, or is it only intended at university level? Could you I know you mentioned this just now, but can you elaborate on the audience that you think would be able to work and gain from this?
So in Project GUTS, we work with students ranging from maybe 5th grade as a starting point for using Star Logo Nova. And we find that after a year, students are ready to use another tool, or often want to use a text-based tool. The other thing about NetLogo is that there are built-in tools within NetLogo that let you run those parameter sweeps and generate the data out the back end without having to watch the simulation over and over again. So it becomes a powerful tool for experimentation for the high school, older kids. But even the middle school kids want to learn NetLogo after a year or so. And there is a very good translation between the programs. One is block-based, the other is text-based, but the concepts flow from one to the other smoothly.
Thomas, you know, exactly what you were talking about right now, says he really likes how students are examining and questioning the data and getting an analysis and really thinking and analyzing the problem and the artifacts in the simulation. In order to get the students started to think about it, you know, think about the content in terms of simulation, because it is a fairly hard abstract concept. He was just curious about what kind of available readings are available. Are there? What would you recommend?
Yeah.
Really good question. Thank you, Thomas.
So I guess one way we address that with the younger students is we do participatory simulations or live group simulations and then show the analogous computer model. So for example, we play a game called Turn and Walk, where you have a group of students in the center of a room acting as the agents. You have them spread out, and you give them a set of simple rules, such as turn to the neighbor on your left, and set that as your heading and take 3 steps forward. And they don't know. They're following these instructions iteratively. But what they're doing is they're developing a spiral formation that's spiraling inward. But you would do it with a group of students, you know, most of them as observers and some of them as the agents. And you can ask for new rules, like what if it was right instead of left? What if instead of taking 3 steps forward, you only took 1 step forward? What would the results be? Or what if you started in a scattered configuration? And then you can bring them back inside into the lab and look at the computer model of the similar phenomena. So you can ask questions like, okay, what's different between the real world and the computer model? What is represented well in the computer model? What is the behavioral difference between kids doing it and agents in the computer model? So we want them to have this healthy skepticism of what models, how much they represent the real world, right? Mm-hmm. So that they don't just think that models will generate the answer. It really depends on how much the abstractions from the real world are captured in that model.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And Amin goes on to ask a couple of questions. I'll ask the first one for you. From the examples mentioned and presented, mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that students need to have a decent math background, or is the math supported through the process of modeling and simulation?
So first of all, agent-based modeling needs very little math, unlike other types of modeling that you can do. So the beauty of agent-based modeling is you can create an extremely powerful model with almost very little math at all. You don't really need any algebra.
You need movement.
You need to be able to say a little knowledge about degrees from where you're facing to a new orientation. And a little
probability.
But in terms of like rolling a dice, probability, no advanced probability concepts, and that's really it. In the New Mexico Computer Science for All program, we have no prerequisites for the computer science class, the dual credit computer science class, and we also have no GPA requirement for the class. So we've taken students from a wide variety of backgrounds, and
they've been able to be successful.
They've been for the most part very successful.
So we do have, we've heard from teachers that they like that the work in modeling and simulation reinforces math concepts, the coordinate plane, angles, probability, and such, patterns and data. Yeah. So there's good ties between the two, but we don't use any math as a prerequisite because we feel they can learn it through the modeling and simulation.
And he had another question too. He was wondering if he could have access, was wondering if he could have access to the research data.
Sure. Let's see, we are at the tail end and just getting the research data from the 2 cohorts together with New Mexico Computer Science for All. And on the Project GUT site, the most research data, some of it is published through ACM Inroads. Other data, there could be some links on the website. I have to check. I can upload some more information.
Great. Thank you on that one. I think that would be a very valuable resource for many people to just understand, and especially to be able to justify using their curriculum in their classroom, which I think I remember trying something very similar in my middle school classroom, and I wanted to use your stuff.
Right. So I can tell you the research data is generally about students learning of complex systems concepts. It was done prior to the focus of, computer science and science. It was more about learning about systems, but it's still valuable.
Right. And Nathaniel has a question. I'm really interested in the sharing aspect. Are there sites for sharing that target specific audiences? For example, is there a place where junior high students could share and collaborate? That's a fabulous question.
I know through the Star Logo Nova site that students are able to share their galleries It's still a little bit vestigial. It's not as well developed as, say, Scratch's community of users, but it has some of the same functionality where you can share your models. We are also currently developing Teachers with Guts as an online professional development network over the next year or two, which will be an area where teachers can share their models and their experiences with teaching computer modeling and simulation.
Great. Great.
There are a variety of places available to share NetLogo programs, but it's not really a community in the same sense that you're talking about. So, yes.
Great. Amin has this big thumbs up for you guys. He says this is some really cool stuff. He says this is his favorite hangout that he's had this all summer. He loves the examples, and I must say, you're competing with the likes of Lynn Diaz and Owen Astrakan and Fran Trees, and on the other hand, Baker and Brooke and Jeff Kramer from London, and so for it to be a favorite hangout of all, that's very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I'm just curious, when you do the PD, are there any concepts specifically in your curriculum that teachers might have more challenges with, or that you may see over and over? And is there any ways to kind of that you found that help them over that hump?
You know, initially with Project Guts, we see teachers who say, I need step-by-step instructions. I can't build this on my own. My students will need step-by-step instructions. And we don't readily provide that. We say the learning really is in the experimentation and building your own model and fail 1,000 times. You know, this is a practice that you learn through, you know, it's a school of hard knocks over and over again. We have to get comfortable with making mistakes, and there is no perfection. The beauty of modeling and simulation, though, is, you know, there are many different ways to be successful,
right.
And many different algorithms for different behaviors that can encapsulate something of the real world.
There is another comment more than anything else that Kathy feels that the fact that you have this collaboration ability for teachers to be able to share is a very good feature.
Super.
Because, you know, the more that definitely enriches the community as such.
And it's a new practice. You know, there are research scientists who've been doing this for a number of years, but in education and bringing it down to the student level, it's very new. We are lucky, and it's a good timing, because the National Resource Council and the NGSS have put out their framework in which computational thinking, modeling, and simulation are intrinsic new scientific practices. But as we see it, you know, there are 160,000 middle and high school teachers in this country who are going to need to learn how to do this over the next 5-10 years, right? So as early as we can start developing communities and resources for these teachers, both to get comfortable with computer science, modeling, and computational thinking, the better.
There was a article, I think, the College Board just put out almost a week ago, or even sooner, that taking computer science classes could help even improve mathematics learning and other courses. The computer can help with that. I'm wondering if you're seeing anything, because sometimes the argument for something new, like Guts and other kinds of things you may be doing, is that there's a fear that it's taking place of something. You're taking hours out of the curriculum, and so I think of the other side, though. Do you have any evidence where by doing this, you're not only adding the computational kinds of learning, but you're actually enhancing and kind of making the science that's in the traditional curriculum more easier to learn or more fun?
Right.
I'm just wondering, do you have any kind of data or any kind of intuition or feeling on that?
Anecdotal data from teachers.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about? We have a group of teachers who teach both this CS for All class and science, and those teachers seem to have seen some improvement in their science class from the students who took the CS for All class. Their way they thought about science was different. They had a more research sort of approach to science.
Right. And it was more malleable. It wasn't
Yeah.
just what I read in the book is right. It's, oh, I can make a model of that and study it myself and develop my own intuition about that.
That makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
There is a question from Bradley Maverick Bearden. I also want to give a big thumbs up, and I really like the questions and pedagogy you've shared with us as you went through the Hangout. Any other ways in which you develop modeling and abstraction from the students, I would like to know. I love the walk-around example. He's wondering what questions do you ask or you don't ask that will actually promote student thinking or help channelize funnels to kids in a specific direction.
Okay. Well, we have some scaffolding for creating models and running experiments with models, and these are what we call common forms. We have one called model observation. So it's a guided set of questions that we ask students when they're opening a new model for the first time and experimenting with it. You know, what are the agents? What are the interactions? What are the abstractions? And then we have another one that's experimental design form that has, you know, what are you interested in? What are the parameters that you think are important? What are the values you're going to run those through? So it guides students through using the model as an experimental test bed. Then we have other forms that are for the model design. You know, what elements you're going to design a model from scratch now. What is it going to be an abstraction of? What questions are you going to ask of it? What are the components? What are the interactions? So it's kind of guided thinking before the students dive in and actually start programming. And we feel that's a really important thing. Or they're just adding, oh, let's add some fish. Let's add some airplanes. And you don't have a question. And at that point, you really lose the scientific component. It's fun, but you know, in our case, we are integrating within science, so we do have some scaffolded guides that help both teachers and students use and create models.
Cool, and we have Nathaniel. Again, there are just so many people who have been excited. It's kind of, this is fabulous, right? Because we, you know, in our own little world, we tend to think everybody knows what we're doing, but when we do something like the MOOC, you really realize, because this is fabulous what Nathaniel says. I can see this, using this, both my computer science class in the high school, as well as my junior high general science class, and get some cross collaboration, and that's exactly what we intend for this to be. So that's fabulous. So thank you.
We think like a really good progression would be at the beginning of the year, if within a technology or even a math class or a CS class, students can learn how to use the tool and the thinking processes of making models and simulations, and then whether they're in their math class, their science class, their social science class, there comes a phenomena that they want to study in more depth, they have this toolkit that they can use to study that. So we see it as a general purpose tool that hopefully can be used across more and more courses, subject content.
There is one more. I mean, this is not just a kudos. Great, Richard Lynn Roberts, great hangout. What I have hoped for AP computer science principles will be modeling and simulations, highly integrated across the curriculum. Thanks. I have already downloaded NetLogo, but I really like Scratch and the shareability it offers. In AP Biology, we use modeling with Scratch. I did too, Robert, last year for 2 of the 13 recommended labs. Awesome.
Interesting. Interesting.
Fantastic. And then, you know, that makes sense, especially when, you know, there is a certain amount of an intimidation factor. It's great to start with Scratch, and then you see you cannot produce everything cookie cutter. And then you go to something like what you guys have produced, so that you can take the pre-made stuff and start teaching the concepts with the models existing.
Yes. Right. And students can take it further and customize.
Right. Richard, I want you to know that's exactly the progression I had. I started with scratch and then went on to these folk stuff to teach my junior high and my high school students in CSP studies.
Great.
Yep. Wonderful. Fantastic. It's been an incredibly successful response.
Thank you.
Somebody says, great discussions, flow of participants has been great.
Super.
Very nice. Oh, that was Jeff.
So I did not share our contact information. I'm Lee at santafe.edu. In case anyone has any questions or wants to continue the conversation, please feel free to email me. And Maureen?
mpd@santafe.edu.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks Irene and Maureen for coming on. I know you all have a very busy week with all the activities and PD and things you've been working on, so we really appreciate your time and coming and sharing. I know a lot of folks may not have been familiar with your work and now have been introduced to that, and I'm sure we'll take that on. So thanks so much, and we'll have a lot. We are actually archive these, so this video will be up for a while for others to also learn more about the things that you all have been doing. So thanks so much. Sadly, this is our last hangout of our MOOC, but it ended with a great discussion. So thanks for motivating that with us. So
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
We all have a good weekend, and for those still out there on the MOOC, we will see you on Piazza with some of the upcoming lessons, and y'all take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.